Woof.
Okay, so here is World of Warships DevBlog. Um, this is from today, actually. This came out today. I know it's about submarines. I don't know a lot of what is in it. This will be my first read and basically unedited reaction to this. So I'm interested to see, knowing the subject of this, what this is going to be like. So this is about submarines, and it's about your questions answered. Your questions. I don't know if these are any of my questions, but this is supposed to be our questions answered. So they're talking about, important step in the game, and submarines have appeared in early access. They've made significant progress, done a lot of work to bring the new class to its current state. They understand it's impossible to make submarine gameplay suit everyone. Yeah, but shouldn't they make it suit at least, a large portion of the player base? I don't know. But we strive to create a comfortable, understandable gameplay loop that provides many players with a new and interesting experience. Of course, after the release of submarines, we will continue to work on this new class. However, as we've already stated for the next few updates, after 11.9, we are not planning any significant changes. This way, players can get used to the new class subs. Let's see, submarines can find their place in the meta, and we can gather the most relevant and accurate spreadsheet statistics possible. So, they want to give us answers to the most popular questions regarding the new ship type. So, okay, let's take a look at this. Why are they adding submarines to the game? To diversify the game experience. Well, they've darn sure done that. It has diversified the game into often a worse experience than what it was. So we'll see. Oh, let's see what else they're talking about. Keeping players happy and engaged for many years to come. They need to evolve and change. So we got to change stuff. Let's see. Continuous and regular flow of new content, new mechanics, new gameplay. Has a wider variety of experiences and interactions with players. Both are extremely important for the game. Okay. So the subs have come a long way in testing, almost 3 years since the concept was created, and I'll give them props for that. They've had these subs in development 3 years. I will not beat up Wargaming at all about the amount of time they've spent developing that. Now, the state that they've developed it into is a different category altogether. So, finally, only about a year ago, subs were added to random battles where we, Wargaming, based on your battles, brought them up to release-ready status, okay? That's a long way to go for developing one ship type, and we needed to move on. Thus, the next step is getting submarines into early access. Okay, hold on then. Hang on. I want to take a quick look at this little paragraph. Okay, so here is how I process this paragraph. I'm processing the content of this paragraph to say, we've spent 3 damn years developing these subs, and we've had them in the game for a year, so we're pressing the F it button. It's time to get them out there and move on to something else. That's how I'm reading that. Now, maybe that's not what they intended, but that's what I'm reading in this. Wow. Okay. So they're talking about how long they've spent developing these, but they're saying that's a lot of time to spend on one ship type. Well, yeah, it is a lot of time. That should, in and of itself, tell them something, but it doesn't appear to. And we needed to move on. So this is just saying that we've spent enough time on it. We're just throwing it out there and moving on. Okay, that's who cares if it's where it needs to be? We've spent 3 years, and that's more than enough. We got to get on to other stuff, try to make more money. So great. So, of course, all this time, they've been watching the perception of the new class, evaluating parameters and metrics to make sure they're moving in the right direction. Players' perceptions of submarines varied, but different attitudes towards change are normal. That is a true statement. I can speak from experience that every time Windows has updated to the next version, I've generally not much cared for the next version initially, but then you just got used to using it. And that's probably what subs are ending up being. It's like you don't have to like it, you just have to do it, get used to it, and move on. That's really what it comes down to. Separately, they should note that the perception of subs appeared to be significantly influenced by the fact of playing on them. Those who played at least a few battles better understood their gameplay strengths, weaknesses, and effectiveness. Chart below shows how the number of players who were against adding subs to the game permanently varied based on the number of battles played in the subs. So now they're going to take their data and say, well, if you played them, more likely to like them, right? Is that what I'm getting at? So 0 battles played. So this shows players who were against. So they're saying for those who haven't played subs, yeah, right here, that 43% did not. So I'm in the 43%. Frankly, that number seems a bit low to me, but maybe it's because people who are against something are more vocal than those positive about it. Could be. And then people who have played at least 1 to 5 battles, then that number drops almost in half. And then if people played 6 to 5 battles, that drops basically in half. So they're just showing him, basically this is the old thing. There used to be an old commercial that said, try it, you'll like it. Well, that's basically what they're trying to tell us. If you try it, you'll like it. Or you'll be less apt to hate it. Okay, I'll believe it when I see it. One thing I can say is I have finally come around and played some games in carriers over the past several months, just because, I want to learn more about them. So that's the reason I would even consider playing subs, is to learn more about them so I can more easily kill them. So let's look at the next item. Why don't you add it to a separate, only to a separate battle type? Well, I know the answer to this, and it's probably going to make sense. Let's see. Creating a ship type that's limited to only one battle type does not fulfill its main purpose, increasing the diversity of gameplay. Well, that's not what I was thinking. We want all ship types to be present in all battle types, including the main one, random battles. Key principles: if the player has researched or purchased a ship, they should be able to play it in whatever battle they want to. Now, I get all of that. I get all of that. And I also understand if you made a game type, say, well, subs or carriers or something like that are not included in the game type, it can really potentially slash the number of players on the server trying to get into that game type and make the wait times a lot longer. And I know that's a big sticking point for not only the players, but for Wargaming. We don't want the queue wait time to go up. So I get it. Neither here nor there. Ship types limited on one battle type becomes not only less interesting, but also does not fulfill the main goal, basically adding more crap to the game. That's what it amounts to. Okay. Next item, shotgunning. So, at this point, shotgunning is not widespread. It is for those who know how to do it. The individual player's experience plays a large role in it. Well, of course it does. The players that know what they're doing are going to be good in subs. And they're saying, experienced players, they've seen experienced players using it effectively. However, they're saying these experienced players can, have a greater impact on the game in other ship types as well, and that is correct. Your Unicums and Super Unicums are going to have a much bigger effect on the game no matter what kind of ship they're playing in general. I don't know. So they're saying that they believe that in real battle, shotgunning, although applicable, will rarely happen. Well, I've seen it happen quite a few times, and I've also seen it misplayed, like they didn't quite shotgun soon enough, so the torps didn't arm. And I've actually been able to ram a sub to death with a battleship whenever they screwed that up, so which was quite satisfying, I must mention. So they're mentioned before. They've already told us we're not going to give any significant changes to the gameplay. So there you go. They're saying we're not changing, we're not doing anything about shotgunning. Okay. Now, even though I've seen it, does it like happen every game or all the time? I don't know. I'd really try to have as little interaction with subs as I can, honestly. And, if I do have interaction, I'm just trying to kill them. So, ASW for the Dutch cruisers and Leone and Okhotnik. So currently they do not plan to add ASW for Leone and Okhotnik. However, they do intend to give the Dutch cruisers depth charges. Interesting. Not sure about the decisions of whether cruisers get depth charges or the strike planes. I would tend to believe that heavy cruisers would be more likely to get strike planes, and maybe that is how it is set up. I haven't really paid that close of attention to it, but they're talking about a previous dev blog when creating models of premium ships. They say if a ship was historically built to completion, they make it correspond to the real ship, best their ability. In reality, Leone was not equipped with depth charge launchers or any other means of dropping depth charges. As for Okhotnik, we designed the ship as of 1917 according to the project without any significant changes. According to the project, it was not supposed to have ASW. That's why they have no depth charges. So wouldn't there be other ships that wouldn't have them as well? Anyway, as for researchable Dutch cruisers, they do plan to add depth charges. It'll take some time because they'll have to update their models and all that stuff. I get that. Okay. We'll move on to the next one. How do you fight a submarine if you cannot deal damage to it? That's a damn good question. But actually, you can deal damage to submarines. It's just the way in which you deal damage to them and the ridiculousness of being able to be constantly spotted and never see a sub. Not just like a stealthy DD, but you can't radar them. You can't hydro them unless you're within 2.5 kilometers, whatever that is. So you can't do any of that. The only way you can spot a sub is when another sub uses its sub-only sonar. So, yeah. But anyway, they're just talking about damage as one of the many ways to interact with subs. And they're talking about, the vast majority of ships having depth charges or airstrikes and how you can damage them if they're at periscope depth. I get that. But if there's no direct way to do damage, it is worth relying on Allied air support and using other countermeasures. Okay. Yeah, good luck relying on all that air support. Many ships are equipped with hydro, which can detect a submarine at any depth. No, it can't. I'm pretty sure I recall, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I am pretty sure that I recall that subs can only be detected by sonar at about 2.5 kilometers, no matter what your sonar range. You can have 6 kilometer hydro, but you can only detect a sub when you're within 2 or 2.5 kilometers of him. So correct me if I'm wrong there, but subs can also be detected by surveillance radar. Yeah, but only if they're surfaced, exactly. fuel spills and ping launch effects. Well, yeah, we got that. Now, really, the main thing that that's good for is telling you where to send your plane, your plane launches at. And good luck with that. After all, a submarine's dive capacity is limited. Well, it may be limited, but it takes a long time for it to run out and force it to the surface. So, it's very easy for a sub to stay submerged for a pretty good amount of time, and you can't do a lot about it. So, I don't know. I don't think this answer really says much to it, and it's really could be worded different. It's like, how can you fight the sub if you don't have a way to detect the sub very well? Yeah, you can deal damage to it if it's spotted and such, but that's not really what it's all about. Subs are not under the same rules that the other ship types are as far as getting detected by radar and getting detected by hydro. They can be detected, but only if they're surfaced, or only if you're within, a very limited range to the sub. So that's all I'll say about that. Why did you decide to keep nullification of sonar ping sectors via the damage control party? It's already used for many tasks. Well, I'm glad that we have some way to nullify that, else you would just get homing torped to death. The homing torps are my big sticking point with subs. That's my big sticking point. To me, subs should not have, or if you do have homing torps, they should only home just for a little bit after they're launched. Like, I don't know, like they home out to couple kilometers or something from the sub, something like that. They shouldn't home until they're almost to the target. That is too advanced for World War II, in my opinion. So, but they are saying that serves the same. It's basically, what they're saying in this is that damage control party is the same purpose for fighting fires and floods. It's trying to avoid or mitigate damage, and I'll agree that if you use it right and at the right time, you can, help dodge torps. So there you go. They're giving an example of instead of a submarine that pings the target, it could be a light cruiser that sets multiple fires, actively firing HE shells, and that would overload the damage control. So they're just talking about that, you've got that same dynamic going on as getting set on fire or getting flooded by a DD or something like that, that a lot of stuff can happen and overload your damage control so that you don't have it to use. I get that. I don't really have a gigantic problem with this. I'm glad we are able to use that to help mitigate the tracking of the torps, which is what I do have the big problem with. ASW for hybrids. As they already mentioned in the DevBlog, they're going to test depth charge airstrike on the new U.S. hybrids branch. They're going to closely monitor the progress of testing. Now, I have seen some of the automatic, like what carriers are going to get and everything, so that they get an automatic ASW. And so far, those appear to be ridiculously overpowered. I'm hoping that they'll tune or nerf those or something. But maybe not. Actually, maybe they won't do it, and those boats will just automatically nuke any sub that gets in their range. That would be okay too, I guess. Next question. At what distance do acoustic torpedoes stop homing? Are there any plans to change them? It's noticeably harder for destroyers to evade them. So yes, you do have different homing distance losses, I think, depending on the ship type. So, and it says stops homing depending on the type of the ship and the tier of the sub and the number of pings. So it ranges from a few hundred meters to 1.5 to 2 kilometers. No plans to change these. And that's, again, that is my problem. These homing torps, you know, just no. Just no. I have had torps turn 90 degrees to track down a ship. 90 degrees. No, that should not be happening. Now, that's, and I can't say any more than that, because it will salt the tater. That's all I can say. Next question: why was the guaranteed acquisition for subs removed? Because an accidental encounter with an enemy submarine at such close range prevented the sub from performing its main gameplay feature, attacking from unusual positions. Really? Okay. Interaction at such a short distance, while quite convenient for both subs, is impossible to destroy the enemy quickly because of the torpedo arming range. It was also impossible to quickly get out of the fight due to the limited maneuverability of subs. Yeah, they're fast enough. So 2 options were left: ram the enemy sub or help for allies. So they decided to disable this. And they're satisfied with the way submarines interact with each other. Okay. They're working on a solution to solve the blind collision of submarines underwater. Just make it automatic that they can't collide. Why not? You know, just make it where they just automatically evade each other. But they do not have any plans to bring back guaranteed acquisition for submarine. Well, great. So, you know, this is another one I have a big problem with, because they're saying, you know, well, if a sub gets detected, it can't do its main gameplay feature. Well, what about DDs? If I get detected by another DD, if I'm in a DD and get detected by another DD, it makes it hard to do my main function, which would be to launch torps and land torps on targets if I'm a stealthy torp boat. So why don't we have DDs not able to detect each other? And maybe that's a poor argument, but that's the one I'm using. Let's go on to the next question. Why does it take so many depth charges to destroy submarines? Now, this is a very damn good question, and I'm going to tell you, I've personally landed more than a dozen depth charge hits. Now, obviously, probably, maybe not many of those were direct hits, but at least a dozen plus hits. And that is in addition to damage done by other ships and by the guns on my DD before a sub was finally killed, which seems a little much to me. So they're going to give us the spiel that depth charges do not always inflict the same damage. Well, I get that. You know, you can have light splash damage or you can have direct hits. Hey, I get that. But, you know, I would think, and I know this is a game and not a simulation, but I would think if a sub's underwater and you're hitting it with light splash damage and you've done that, you know, 6, 8, 10 times, you've put a serious hurt on that ship at that point. It's going to be largely incapacitated. So, don't know. They're saying in the case of light splash damage, more hits will be needed to destroy. Well, we know that. And so supposedly they've added special ribbons to show full damage and partial damage hits, which is interesting. I did not know that. So that's at least interesting to give us some feedback on whether we're getting good hits or not. And I maybe get why they don't want just one depth charge to kill the sub. I get that, but still, when you can get hit by guns and get hit by a dozen, you know, damage from a dozen or more depth charges, that seems a bit excessive. Yeah, it says within the changes made, depth charge airstrike had the number of depth charges per payload reduced, but the damage increased. Well, we'll see how that works. Oh boy, there's just not really any good news here, is there? Is there, chat? It's not many good, not much good news in the way of subs, I'm telling you. Next question says, how does damage from ship dropped depth charges and ASW airstrikes change with distance? At what depth do they explode? Well, I mean, makes sense. The further you're away from the sub, the less damage the sub received. Okay, that's great. Got no problem with that. Splash zone is a sphere with a certain radius, and it says that the zone that covers the entire traversable depth of the sea. But the ship-mounted depth charges have a radius twice as big and making the splash zone wider. Okay. Damage depends on distance to the center of the sphere. So if it explodes near a submarine, it does full damage. If it explodes farther away, it receives incomplete damage. So for ship-mounted depth charges, it's always 33%. In the case of airstrike charges, it can be 50% or 0%. The submarine's at the edge of the splash area. Okay, and then of course the submarine can get a flooding on it or critical module damage. The depth at which they explode, the speed at which they sink, and the time for it to explode differ between ship-mounted and airstrike depth charges. So the airstrike charges are slower to submerge and faster to explode. Ship-mounted submerge faster and explode after a longer time has passed. So basically they're saying, you know, if you drop depth charges, they go down further. If you have a plane attack, they don't go down quite as far before they explode, is what that says. You know, I really don't have a lot of serious comments on this. I mean, it is what it is. We're going to all have to play in that sandbox we've given. So what do you do? Do you plan to increase the efficiency of destroyers against submarines? Could they have a choice between depth charge and airstrike depth charges? No plans at this time. They're saying that the relative damage score, which is the fraction of the enemy ship's maximum hit points that you inflicted on the enemy to subs, is about the same for destroyers, cruisers, and battleships. No plans to change the ASW of characters. Depth charge airstrike is indeed easier to use as it can be launched from a distance and with a stable frequency. But, you know, I get it. They're talking about you got to be close to them to drop depth charges, but you have a certain distance that you can send your planes when you do a plane drop. It says if you look at the data that both of these types of ASW weapons are close in effectiveness. So the presence of the depth charges on DDs is due to the balance and gameplay needs. And additionally, the image of a destroyer dropping depth charges on subs is exactly what submarine hunting is associated with in reality. Well, I don't have any problems with, you know, DDs having depth charges and having to get up close and personal to subs. I mean, that is kind of traditional. And, you know, then you got the ASWs on some of the other ships. At least you have a little bit of ability to mitigate or to deal with the subs a little bit that you didn't have before. So that's here nor there. I'm not gonna find any issue with that. How do you plan to solve the skill gap problem of different submarine players? So currently the difference in skill among sub players is on par with the rest of the ship types. It becomes an issue when there is a significant gap between battle efficiency metrics of different player cohorts. In the case of submarine, the difference in skill across player cohorts is on par with the rest of the ship types. So they're talking about compare the difference in win rate between different player cohorts on submarines and destroyers, the closest ship type to submarines in terms of gameplay. Okay, so this graph below So it looks like they're saying it shows the increase in win rate difference for different players compared to players with an account win rate lower than 47%. So what they're saying is, if there's a value of 10% for the green bar down here, it means that an account with a win rate of 52 to 56% have win rate 10% higher in this particular ship than players with an account win rate lower than 47. So, okay, basically what they're showing is all these numbers look the same. You know, if you look at the DDs, go up about 5% difference in the different win rate tiers. You got below 47, then the orange is 47 to 51, which is average and above, slightly above average. You got 52 to 56, which is above average, and 57, which is well above average. So if you look at these DDs, 0, 5, 10, 15, Benson, the Akizuki, which are all similar in numbers, then the subs are 0, 5, 9, 13, 0, 5, 10, 16 for the salmon. Very similar. And then that was at tier 8. At tier 10, they're showing similar kind of numbers. Now, this is all great and wonderful and well and good, but we all know that a Unicum player is going to, potentially, he's going to play subs very effectively compared to other players, same as they were if they were playing DDs or battleships or cruisers. They can, have a much higher effect on the game because of their skill level. That's always been in the game. It is what it is. They claim that it's roughly the same for subs it is for DDs. Maybe it is. I don't know. I really don't even know how I feel about that or why it seems like they're trying to convince us. They're trying to convince us that, oh, look, no, subs aren't that bad. They're not really that bad. So I don't know. That's what I get out of that they feel like they got to try to find some way to convince us that, yeah, we're doing the right thing. Why don't homing torpedoes have dispersion? So they're saying they do. It may seem to be absent. Well, that's because when they home, you no longer do have dispersion. They all track to the same darn part of the ship. But they're saying there's a dispersion because they launch torpedoes one at a time, like British ships. But they cluster because they home in towards a small part of the ship marked by a sector rather than that whole ship. There you go. My question would be, why don't you just make a ping not pick a specific spot on the ship? Just make the ping light the whole ship up so that when the torps track in towards the ship, they're not all tracking to that one little spot. And that does two things. It kind of evens out the damage a little bit because you might be more apt to not be able to dodge all the torps. In other words, it might be more likely that you can't dodge all the torps, but it's also much less likely that you're going to get hit with all of them, because right now it seems to be kind of an all or nothing thing. You're going to get hit with all of them or none of them. So I don't know. Just a thought. If we're talking about acoustic torpedoes being too compact, and if all or most of the torpedoes hit the target on a successful launch, this is indeed true. However, this density of torpedoes has a downside. In the case of an inaccurate launch, timely nullification of the homing sector, or a simple maneuver, there's a probability that all the torpedoes miss. And that's what they're saying. They're saying, well, it's kind of an all or nothing thing. You have a better chance to dodge, so just dodge, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, and they're saying, oh, well, but if you do get hit with the torpedoes, when they come again, they won't do as much damage if they hit you in the same places. That gives me a lot of solace there, really. Wow. Yeah. Like I said, I have a big problem with the homing part of the torps. That's all I can just only continue to repeat that. Are there plans to reduce the speed of subs? No plans. We are happy with their speed. Great. Lower speed combined with not so high weapon range would make the gameplay boring and reduce their effectiveness. Okay. At this point, it's just kind of like, whatever you say, Wargaming. Are there plans to make balance changes to ships based on the strength of ASW armament? Well, yes. ASW as well as AA, main battery reload time, etc., are some of the parameters by which ships can be balanced. Oh, Lord. Don't ASW goes the way of AA, then be next to useless, or even more useless than it already is. Recently, we unified depth charge airstrike for all cruisers and battleships equipped with this armament. So, not only will this make it easier for us to adjust depth charge airstrike in the future, it'll also make it easier to balance ships by this parameter. Okay. So it just means that they can mess around with the effectiveness of an ASW on a ship-by-ship basis, just like AA. Need I say more? All right, last two questions. First is, why do surfaced subs take damage from depth charges while the rest of the ships do not? This is a gameplay assumption. At one stage of testing, ASW was used by surface ships against each other to do damage. However, we wanted ASW weapons to only be used against subs. So basically, much like friendly fire being disabled, they also disabled the ASW to work against non-subs. So it's a selective explosion. You know, you can set off one underneath your battleship or cruiser or DD and it won't hurt them, but it would hurt the sub. There you go. And lastly, why don't you add AA to submarines? Holy crap. At the moment, submarines don't have the need for AA, and I'll agree with that. What good is it when they stay underwater most of the time? They could have very limited AA armament mounted, which would be ineffective. In addition, it's important for a submarine to remain undetected in order to play effectively. And to shoot down planes, the sub would have to surface and get detected, and therefore have a chance to get killed. Therein relies why you don't want AA on a sub. I actually agree with this, and plus it's not, again, I know this is a game and not a simulation, so to speak, but that is more historically accurate that there tended not to be AA guns on submarines. So this actually makes some amount of sense. Saying that the detectability range of subs by air is small, averaging 2 kilometers, so it can easily avoid interacting with aircraft. Yeah, and I agree with that. So they're just saying that submarines don't need to rely on AA to defend themselves from aircraft. But they're saying, hey, if we think we need it, we can return and revisit this. Wow. Okay, so to recap, what do we get out of this development blog? Well, basically, what I'm getting out of it is that one particular paragraph with the statement that just said, we've spent 3 years on it and it's low enough. We're hell bent to get these things released and we're throwing up our hands and we're getting them out there, whether you like it or not. And here's a bunch of reasons why you should be okay with it, or why the data says it's really not so bad. That's what I got out of most of this is they're trying to convince the player base that, yeah, this is actually not such a bad thing. It's doing what we intended it to do, and we don't want to spend any more time on it. That's what I'm getting out of. Wish it could be better news, but that's just basically what I read out of it. Read something different out of it, by all means. Throw me some comments. I'll probably clip this out and put it on YouTube. So throw me comments on my YouTube channel if you have differing opinions of what you're getting out of some of these questions. By all means, I'd love to hear them, but when it comes to submarines, I'm a bit salty toward them. So won't say any more than that. But that is it. That is the complete first read and reaction to the October 11th DevBlog on submarines and our questions answered. So everything you always wanted to know and have answered but were afraid to ask. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to see notifications of future videos, just ring the bell. Until next time, Tater Dawg says, woof.